So one of the complications I had during my pregnancy was gestational diabetes. And it was difficult for me to accept this diagnosis. The night I got diagnosed, I got home and I cried all through the night. I went through the whole stages of grief within 24 hours. I had this form of guilt and this form of shame, like I did something wrong, I didn't eat healthy before pregnancy, that's why I had gestational diabetes. That is totally false. I just thought to myself, you know what, I can do this. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it well. And at the end of the day, I had a good pregnancy. I have healthy babies now. And I do not have diabetes after pregnancy. Hi guys, and welcome back to Truthfully Toyosi. I know it's been a minute, and trust me, life has been lifing, so I haven't really had time to create content. But thankfully, I'm back again, and we're here, and I'm happy to see you guys. So for a while now, I've been wanting to create a content about some of the complications that happened to me while pregnant with the twins. And finally, I just picked the courage, and I'm going to be talking about that today. So one of the complications I had during my pregnancy was gestational diabetes. So I'm going to be talking about gestational diabetes, how I got diagnosed, what it felt like getting diagnosed with gestational diabetes, and how I survived gestational diabetes, especially being an African and eating a lot of high carbohydrate meal, because most of our African food are made of high carbs. So how I survived that and how I had a healthy pregnancy and healthy babies. With no further ado, let's get into it. I'm Dr. Tyi&x, a board certified medical doctor in the United Kingdom, and I am also a twin mom, which is one of the jobs I'm really proud of. So on this channel, aside helping you learn medicine from the comfort of your room, another thing we do here is we also talk about family and how to make the best choices for your family. If that sounds like something you're interested in, go ahead and smash the subscribe button right now because you're going to be getting a lot of that. Okay, guys, let's talk gestational diabetes, also known as GDM. What is gestational diabetes? Gestational diabetes is a kind of diabetes you get while pregnant. It's a diabetes that usually, but not always, resolves after pregnancy. And what is diabetes? Diabetes simply means high blood sugar. So gestational diabetes in essence is having high blood sugar during pregnancy, which usually but not always resolves after pregnancy. So GDM usually occurs in about 5 to 7% of pregnancies. But when it comes to multiple pregnancies like twin pregnancies and triplet, or even more than that, it occurs more frequently. And in my case, I had a twin pregnancy, so I had gestational diabetes. So what happens in pregnancy that makes a woman get gestational diabetes? In a non-pregnant person, the body releases a hormone called insulin normally, and this insulin goes into the blood and regulates the blood sugar. It makes sure that the sugar is not too high and not too low, so it keeps it within a normal range. So in a pregnant woman, what happens is when she eats and she drinks normally, she gets glucose, which is released into the blood as sugar, right? But aside that, the pregnancy itself causes the release of some pregnancy hormones, about 4 pregnancy hormones. And what this pregnancy hormone does is it reduces the effectiveness of insulin. And remember, I said insulin goes into the blood and regulates the blood sugar. So if pregnancy hormone is reducing the effectiveness of insulin, that means that the blood sugar would not be regulated normally. And this is what causes a high blood sugar in pregnancy. Now, it doesn't happen to all pregnant women. There are certain factors that can increase your chance of getting gestational diabetes. Remember, I said pregnancy causes the release of some pregnant hormones, which go and reduce the effectiveness of insulin, right? So who can have gestational diabetes? So now that we know how gestational diabetes comes about, who are the people that can have gestational diabetes? We're going to be talking about the group of people that are high risk of getting gestational diabetes. The first person is a pregnant woman. Remember, gestational diabetes is a kind of diabetes that happens only in pregnancy. It happens in pregnancy and it usually but not always resolves after pregnancy. So if you're a pregnant woman, you're at risk of having gestational diabetes. That is why in the UK here, when you get to around 24 to 28 weeks, it's compulsory for every woman to run a test called OGTT. This is to screen, to check if a woman has gestational diabetes or not. So aside being pregnant, there are other factors that can increase your chances of having gestational diabetes. Your race, if you're Black or Hispanic, your chances of having gestational diabetes are a lot increased. Another factor is age. If you get pregnant after the age of 40, your chances of having gestational diabetes is a lot increased. And this is just normal because as you age, the way your body works or the functionality of your body normally reduces. So as you age, your insulin also will not be as effective as it used to be. And then if you get pregnant on top of that, remember that you're going to be releasing some pregnant hormones, which will further reduce the effectiveness of that insulin. So in essence, it can increase your chances of getting gestational diabetes. So another factor is obesity. If your BMI, which is your body mass index, is greater than 30, there's a high chance of you getting gestational diabetes. Because aside from gestational diabetes, being obese is a risk factor for getting diabetes even outside pregnancy. So if you're obese, you are at a higher risk of getting normal diabetes. Now, if you're obese and pregnant, that's two things combined together, which increases your chances of getting gestational diabetes even higher. Another thing that can increase your chances of getting gestational diabetes is if you've previously had a big baby. So a big baby will be considered a baby with a birth weight greater than 4.5 kg. If you have a baby that at birth, the birth weight was greater than or equal to 4.5 kg, you're at risk of developing gestational diabetes in subsequent pregnancies. If you've also had gestational diabetes in your previous pregnancy, there's also an increased risk of you having gestational diabetes in subsequent pregnancies. And another thing is if you have a family member that has diabetes, maybe your mom or your sibling or your dad, if they have diabetes, now I'm not talking about gestational diabetes, if they have diabetes, you are at a higher risk of developing gestational diabetes when pregnant. Why? Because normally diabetes can have some familial link. So if your parent or your sibling has diabetes, there's an increased risk of you having gestational diabetes. So again, if you've had weight loss surgeries like gastric bypass, it increases your chances of getting gestational diabetes significantly. And finally, if you're carrying multiples, if you're carrying a twin pregnancy, triplet pregnancy, quadruplet pregnancies, your chances of getting gestational diabetes is a lot increased. Now, why is this? Remember, I said that the way gestational diabetes works is when you're pregnant, the placenta releases some hormones. These pregnant hormones goes to the blood and reduces the effectiveness of insulin. And insulin is a hormone released by the body normally to help regulate your blood sugar. So in essence, the culprit here is the placenta. So if you have multiple pregnancies, for instance, you have a twin pregnancy. So there are some kind of twin pregnancies where the twins shares one placenta, or the twins have two different placenta. If you've not watched my video of how to conceive twins, I'm going to put the video somewhere up there so that you can go back and watch it if you're interested in watching it. But anyways, if you're pregnant with multiples, you might have monochorionic pregnancy or dichorionic pregnancy. Monochorionic pregnancy simply means the two babies are sharing one placenta, and if those two babies are sharing one placenta, the placenta will likely be big. And if the placenta is big to accommodate those two babies, that means that a big placenta is going to release more pregnancy hormones, right? So if it releases more pregnancy hormones, the hormones that will go and counteract the effect of insulin will be a lot higher. So the effectiveness of insulin is going to be greatly reduced. Then if you have dichorionic pregnancy, that means each twin has its own placenta. In essence, you have two placentas. So that means both placentas will be releasing pregnancy hormones. And when this happens, you have a lot of pregnancy hormone in circulation. So what it does is it goes to the bloodstream, talks to insulin and says, I need to regulate you. And insulin does not have any power to fight against pregnancy hormones, right? So insulin does not do its job normally, which is to regulate the blood sugar. And then you have high blood sugar. So if you're pregnant with twins or multiple, and that's the same thing for triplets too. If you have triplet pregnancies, you have multiple placentas in your body. So multiple placentas will release multiple pregnancy hormones, which will go and reduce the effectiveness of insulin. All right, guys, so let's talk about how a woman gets diagnosed with gestational diabetes. So in the UK here, every pregnant woman undergoes a screening test around 24 weeks of gestation to 28 weeks. This test is to check if a woman has gestational diabetes. But before this gestational age, before 24 weeks, if you've been visiting your midwife, she would have asked you a couple of questions just to know if you are at a higher risk of getting gestational diabetes. So if you have a higher risk, like the risk factors we just discussed earlier, if from questioning your midwife realizes that you're at an increased risk, you have an increased risk of getting gestational diabetes, what they are going to do is they're going to run this test for you a lot earlier, before 24 weeks. But in my case, I did my tests around 26 weeks, I think. So the test you do is a test called OGTT. It's called the oral glucose tolerance test. And how is this done? You're going to be asked to fast overnight for around 8 to 10 hours, and then you come to the hospital in the morning. And once you come to the hospital, at around 10 hours after your last meal, your blood sample is going to be taken. And immediately your blood sample is taken, you're going to be given a glucose drink containing about 75 grams of glucose. You don't really need to bother yourself about the content, but it contains some form of glucose. And you'll be told to take that drink within 5 minutes period. And once that is done, you're going to be called back 2 hours after the first blood test was taken to have a second blood test taken. And then your blood sugar values will now be compared to the normal range. So if it falls outside the normal range, you're going to be diagnosed with gestational diabetes. Now, how does this happen? Remember, you get glucose through what you eat and what you drink. So if you're asked to fast for at least 8 to 10 hours, that's overnight. Your blood sugar should fall within an expected range, because at this point you've been restricted from external glucose. So if the first blood test is taken and then the range falls above 5.2 millimole per liter, that is a red flag already, right? So after the first blood test is taken, now you are not given external glucose. That's the 75-gram drink. And you've been asked to take this within 5 minutes. So now, after the fasting period, you've been given a calculated concentration of glucose. And then your blood sugar is going to be checked 2 hours after that. So now, if you've been given a calculated concentration of glucose, the normal insulin released in your body should be able to break it down and within that 2 hours, and it should fall within a normal range. But if your insulin is not able to break it down for your blood sugar to fall within a normal range, that means that's another red flag. So in my case, I fasted overnight. I went to the hospital. My first blood test was taken, and the value was 4.9, I think, which is fine, because the normal value should be less than 5.2 millimole per liter, and mine was 4.9. So I passed the first blood test, right? So I was given the second drink. I drank it within 5 minutes, and 2 hours later, I was called in for another blood test. Now the blood sample was taken, and my blood sugar at this point was 7.9 millimole per liter, and the normal range for the second blood test is less than 7.7. Some people use 7.7, some people use 7.8. So let's just say 7.8 millimole per liter should be the normal, right? And mine was 7.9. So my blood sugar was slightly above the normal range. But I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes because the first one was normal. The first blood test was normal. The second one was not normal. So it was gestational diabetes. And it was difficult for me to accept this diagnosis, because what if I ate something heavier the night before? And what if, I had just waited 5 more minutes before the blood test was taken? Would the result have been different? But the truth is, it's usually difficult to accept the diagnosis of gestational diabetes, because number one, I was not obese during my pregnancy. I was within the normal weight limit, right? And then my blood sugar, the second test, were just 1 millimole above normal. So why do I have gestational? Why am I being diagnosed with gestational diabetes? None of my family members have gestational diabetes. None of my family members have diabetes. None of my siblings have diabetes. So why am I getting gestational diabetes? I did not have diabetes before pregnancy. So why am I being diagnosed with gestational diabetes? Could something have gone wrong during the test? These were the scenarios that kept playing and replaying in my head when I got that diagnosis. Even though I'm a medical practitioner, getting that diagnosis was devastating for me. The night I got diagnosed, I got home and I cried all through the night. And aside that, I went through the whole stages of grief within 24 hours. The first one is denial. I was in denial, like I don't have gestational diabetes. My value was just 1 point above the normal range. Nobody in my family has diabetes or has had the gestational diabetes. So I did not have gestational diabetes. But my husband is also a medical practitioner. He's a doctor too. So he was able to calm me down and help me accept this diagnosis. So like I said, I went through the 5 stages of grief. The first one was denial, right? Denial happened. The second one was anger. I was angry. I did not know why this was happening. I was angry at myself. Was it that I ate too much sugar? Even though I knew how gestational diabetes worked, but I was angry. What went wrong? I was angry with myself. I was angry with the situation. I was angry with my environment. And I entered the third phase, which was bargaining. I was thinking to myself, what if I had reduced my sugar intake? Would my values have fallen within the normal range? What if I had fasted for more than 10 hours? Would the values had fallen within the normal range? What if, what if, what if? And at the end of the day, it wasn't even about that, because like we discussed earlier, what you eat or drink has little or no impact on how gestational diabetes works. And then I entered the fourth stage, which was depression. Because trust me, within 24 hours, I was going through a lot of emotions. I felt so sad. My energy was low. I just felt down. I didn't want to get out of bed. I was just in bed crying, wondering why this was happening to me. And mind you, while I was pregnant, I was preparing for my plateau exams. So I had exams, I was working, I was studying hard, I was pregnant with twins, I was dealing with pregnancy symptoms. And on top of that, I had to be diagnosed with gestational diabetes. So it was a whole lot for me. But thank God for support. The role of a supportive partner is very much on the plate. And the last stage was acceptance. When I saw that there was nothing I could have done that would have changed the outcome, I just had to accept this. I accepted the diagnosis and I hit research. You need to research. You need to do a lot of research. You need to start calculating the quantity of carbohydrates in the kind of meal you eat. You need to book an appointment with a nutritionist to help you manage your nutrition. And there are a lot of other things that goes into it. We're going to be discussing that later on. So anyways, I went through the 5 stages of grief in less than 24 hours. And when I got to the point of acceptance, I just thought to myself, you know what? I can do this. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it well. And at the end of the day, I had a good pregnancy. I have healthy babies now. And I do not have diabetes after pregnancy. Remember, earlier I said gestational diabetes is the kind of diabetes you have during pregnancy, which usually but not always resolves during pregnancy. So for some women, even after having gestational diabetes, when they deliver, they go on to have normal diabetes after the pregnancy. So there are a lot of factors that can increase your chances of having diabetes after pregnancy. But in my case, I did not have that. And that was because I was able to control my sugar. So if your sugar is not well controlled during pregnancy, the likelihood of you having diabetes even after pregnancy is a lot higher. So one important thing I would like us to take away from this video, if at all you don't take away anything from this video, the one thing I want you to take away from this video is the fact that gestational diabetes is not your fault. Because at the point of diagnosis, I was, even as a medical professional, knowing how gestational diabetes occurs and what leads to gestational diabetes, I had this form of guilt and this form of shame, like I did something wrong, I didn't eat healthy before pregnancy, that's why I had gestational diabetes. That is totally false. Do not feel any guilt, do not feel shame, because at the end of the day, gestational diabetes is not your fault. There's nothing you could have done that would have changed the outcome of that diagnosis. So please take that home with you. And now, surviving gestational diabetes takes a lot. It's not a journey that anyone should go through alone. There is support for you. You can have support from your midwife, your doctor, your workplace, and even your partner. If you have a supportive partner, you can get support from them. And there are several materials available for you to understand gestational diabetes. Remember, once you get diagnosed with gestational diabetes, you have to hit the research button because it will be important for you to know the kind of meals to eat, what gram of carbohydrate, protein, and fats is contained in that meal, how you can mix and match. And if you're of African descent, it's going to take a lot of work because we know the kind of food we eat, high carbohydrate meal, but then you can always regulate it and use some other substitutes. So I'm going to be talking about that later in this video. So before we move on, I want us to talk about a couple of myths associated with gestational diabetes. So once you get diagnosed with gestational diabetes and you inform your close relatives, some of them can just blame you straight away that it's the kind of food you eat. And that's why, you got diagnosed with gestational diabetes. That is absolutely false. Because whether you eat a lot of sugar or not, normally your body releases insulin, which is supposed to regulate the blood sugar, right? But if you have a lot of placental hormone in your blood, that the function of that insulin will be reduced. So insulin will not be able to act to reduce your blood sugar, and you end up with gestational diabetes when you're pregnant. So it has nothing to do with that. So that is one of the myths. Another thing is, if you are skinny, you cannot get gestational diabetes. That is absolutely false, because in my pregnancy, I wasn't fat. I didn't add a lot of weight. In fact, I was still within the normal recommended weight limit for a pregnant woman, and I ended up with gestational diabetes. And in hindsight, I think it was a blessing in disguise for me, because it helped me get back into shape, because I was forced to be on the diet. So at the end of the day, my postpartum recovery was a little faster. So another myth is, once you get diagnosed with gestational diabetes, you cannot eat sweets. That's absolutely false, especially if in your pregnancy you crave a lot of sweets. You can still have sweets and dessert. You just have to have it in the appropriate proportion. And what do I mean by this? You need to mix and match. Trust me, you can mix a couple of your dessert with some high fiber and protein nuts like granules, walnuts. All of this will help to reduce your blood sugar, and it will prevent you from having sugar spikes. So another misconception or another myth that I usually hear is, people say that whenever you have gestational diabetes, you would have to be placed on medication always. That is absolutely false, because through my journey of gestational diabetes, I did not take one single medication. All I had to do was modify my diet a little bit, then monitor my blood sugar. Since my blood sugar was controlled by modified diet, I did not need any medication. But for some people, they would definitely need medication, because regardless of their dietary modification, their blood sugar is still not controlled. All right, guys, so let's talk about the treatment of gestational diabetes, or the management of gestational diabetes. Now, when you have high blood sugar in pregnancy, the aim is to bring the blood sugar down to fall within normal range. And there are several ways you can do this. Number one, if you modify your diet, we know that eating a lot of carbohydrates can increase your blood sugar, number one. So if you eat more fibers, more vegetable, and less carbohydrate, that can make your sugar fall within the normal range. So that means that at the end of the day, insulin will not have a lot of work to do. So if your sugar is already within the normal range, insulin will really have a little or nothing to do. So if you modify your diet a little bit, insulin will have little or nothing to do, right? So that's one way to look at it. Another way is to give you external insulin. So if the insulin in your body is not functioning properly, we can give you additional insulin. So that will help to regulate your blood sugar. So now the first line of management is dietary modification. In my case, after diagnosis, I was asked to change my diet a bit. I saw a nutritionist who helped me with my dietary modifications. And at the end of the day, my diet was good enough to control my sugar. So I did not need to be placed on any medications. So all through my journey, I just needed to change a few of my diets or modify a few of my diets, and my sugar was controlled. But in some women, even with the dietary modification, their sugar will still not be controlled, and they'll need to be placed on some medication. Sometimes they might be given medications like metformin, or in some cases, even when the tablets are not controlling the sugar, they might be given additional insulin. So you would have to be taking insulin injection. And mind you, while I was on dietary modification, I had to monitor my sugar for at least 4 times a day. It was excruciating, no doubt, because I had to check my sugar. I had to check fasting, 1 hour post breakfast, 1 hour post lunch, and 1 hour post dinner. So what that means is, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is I check my sugar. I prick myself here, then I check my sugar. After eating breakfast, 1 hour after breakfast, I prick again and I check. Then 1 hour after eating lunch, I prick again and I check. And 1 hour after eating dinner, I prick again and I check. So I prick myself at least 4 times a day. So I got diagnosed around 26 weeks and I had my babies at 37 weeks. So for 11 weeks, I was pricking myself 4 times a day. It was excruciating. At some point, my thumb here, the top of my thumb here, became so hard. I had to switch to this finger. And I don't like needles, but it was something I had. At some point, I got tired and I didn't check my sugar for, I think, like 3 days. I didn't check my sugar for, I think, like 3 days. And after diagnosis, I was asked to download an app. So whenever I check my sugar, I'll impute the value in the app. So when I didn't check for 3 days, I think they notified my midwife and she sent me a message that I need to check my sugar, blah, 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 blah. It was hard, but it was something I had to do, and I'm glad I did it. So if I can do it, you can do it. And trust me, there is support for you. You can get support from your midwife. You can get support from the hospital. You can get support from your workplace. You can get support from your antenatal clinic. You can get support from your partner. And there are also some groups, and also Instagram. Then there's a particular lady I follow. I can't remember her handle, but I'm going to put it in the description. She's a diabetic nutritionist, so she helps you modify your diet, and she has ranges of options that can help you modify your diet. So I'm going to put her link in the description because she helped me a lot, and I'm sure that you guys will be able to get some help if you need to. So that's all about the management of gestational diabetes. And usually, but not always, like I said, for gestational diabetes, after delivery, your sugar goes back to normal. But in some people, it continues. So after delivery, you'll be asked to come back and check your sugar 6 weeks later to just make sure that, be sure that you do not have diabetes even after pregnancy. And luckily for me, I did not have, because my sugar was controlled all through pregnancy, right? So gestational diabetes can cause some complications. It can cause some complications to the mother. It can cause some complications to the baby. So what happens is, when a woman has gestational diabetes that is not well controlled, that means when her sugar is always high and it's not controlled, some of that sugar is passed down to the baby. So the baby is used to having excess sugar in the blood. So that can cause some complications to the baby, can also cause some complications to the mother. For the mother, now let's talk about complications for the mother. When a woman has uncontrolled gestational diabetes, she can be at risk of having a cesarean section. That's one of those complications. The second one is she can be at risk of having diabetes even after pregnancy. The third one is she can have pregnancy-induced hypertension, or even something we call preeclampsia. So she's at a risk of having a high blood pressure or a complicated kind of blood pressure in pregnancy, which can be very fatal. So another complication for a woman who has uncontrolled gestational diabetes is it can affect her sight, it can affect her organs, it can affect her kidneys. So there are lots of fatal complications when your sugar is not controlled. And for your baby also, like I explained earlier, if a woman is continually having high blood sugar, her baby will be used to having high blood sugar, because some of those high blood sugar from the woman's blood will pass to the baby. And you know that sugar is glucose. You need glucose, which is energy, to grow. So if your baby is continually having high blood sugar, high glucose, that means your baby is continually having a stimulant to help your baby grow, so your baby can grow even bigger than the normal size, so they can have big babies, so they can have babies greater than 4.5 kg. The woman is planning to have vaginal delivery. So it can cause something called shoulder dystocia. So this just means that maybe during delivery, one of the baby's shoulder is trapped inside, and it makes delivery a bit harder. When the sugar is too high and is not controlled, it can cause sudden fetal death. When we mean sudden, it's actually very sudden, because you can hear the heartbeat now, and in the next 5 to 30 minutes, there's no heartbeat. The heartbeat is gone. So it's very important that your sugar is controlled during pregnancy. Another thing it can cause for babies is hypoglycemia when they are delivered. So hypoglycemia just means low blood sugar. So when your baby is used to having high blood sugar continuously from the mother, once the baby is delivered, the connection between the mother and the baby is suddenly severed, right? That's the placenta. It's suddenly severed, and the baby's blood sugar crashes. Why? Because the baby is already used to having high sugar, and after delivery, the sugar crashes. That's why it's very important to check the baby's blood sugar to make sure that it's normal. When they checked my baby's blood sugars, it was normal. They did like 3 or 4 tests every hour after their delivery, and all of their blood sugar was within normal range. So it's very important also to make sure that your sugar is controlled so that it doesn't affect your baby. Okay guys, let me just give you a rundown of the kind of things I ate that helps me control my blood sugar. So it's important to note that at different stages of your pregnancy, let's say for instance, at 28 weeks, if I eat oats in the morning and check my blood sugar can be within the normal range. But if I eat that same quantity of oats at 32 weeks of pregnancy, my blood sugar might be a little bit high. So there are some factors that can do that. Number one, remember that I said the way gestational diabetes works is when your placenta hormones blocks the action of insulin or reduces the effectiveness of insulin, right? So at 26 weeks, my placenta is still developing compared to 34 weeks, where my placenta has even developed more than it was at 26 weeks. That means if I'm eating like 3 spoons of oats at 26 weeks, that 3 spoons of oats can control my sugar well. But if I eat that same 3 spoons of oats at 34 weeks, it might not control my sugar, because at that stage my placenta had developed a lot bigger and it had released more pregnancy hormones. Another thing that can cause sugar spikes is when you are ill. Whenever you are ill, your body releases some stress hormones also known as cortisol. So this cortisol can also cause a sugar spike. So if you're ill and or modified diabetic diet, it can cause a sugar spike for you regardless of the diet you're taking. Another thing is if you're having warm showers. So immediately you check your sugar after a warm shower, it can cause the sugar spikes. So if you're having these things, do not be so worried, because you are still on the right path. There's just a little bit of situational changes that is causing the sugar spikes, and you can also always adjust your diet to bring it within the normal range. So during my journey with gestational diabetes, I ate a lot of oats for breakfast. So ideally, I'll just eat, say, oats and scrambled eggs, or sometimes oats and boiled egg for breakfast. Sometimes I'll eat brown bread, 2 slices of brown bread with scrambled egg and a glass of semi-skimmed milk. So I couldn't take sugar or honey. So in substitution for that, I was using more of sweeteners. So that was able to help me control my blood sugar. And for lunch, sometimes I'll have boiled sweet potato and scrambled egg also. I'll have basmati rice and a lot of salad and vegetables. So that will help control my portion of carbohydrate, which is the basmati rice, and then I'll fill it up with salad, and then I can have 2 portions of protein, maybe 2 fishes or 2 chickens. So that will help fill me up, but I'll be filled up with a balanced diet, not a high quantity of carbohydrate, compared to when I was not pregnant, where I would just eat a big bowl of rice and stew and maybe chicken, no salad. But in this case, I had to include salad. Then in between, I can have a portion of fruit. I can have an orange. No, I'm just going to put a picture in. So this is a typical breakfast for me. So mostly I eat whole grain bread And sometimes I even get seeded breads because they are a lot better than white bread. So I eat 2 slices of bread and I make omelets. My omelet, I make sure I include a lot of vegetable, tomatoes, spinach if possible, onions, pepper. I have 2 slices of bread and omelette and a glass of milk. It's best to use semi-skimmed milk, or you can use plant-based milk or almond milk. I'm going to include a picture so you see what it looks like. Then I ate a lot of oats during my pregnancy. I would eat oats in the morning. Sometimes I'll have it in the afternoon. Sometimes I'll have it in the night. So sometimes I'll just have oats. I'll add sweetener instead of sugar or honey because sweetener is much better. So I'll use oats and sweetener, then milk. Then I can also have a handful of berries just to have a balanced diet and for it to be filling. So these are some examples of the kind of oats that I used to make. Granola oats and lazy granola. This is very good because it's low sugar and it has a lot of nuts and seed and it's very high fiber. Then for the options of milk, you can use plant-based milk. Then this almond no sugar milk, that's the Alpro milk, is really good, and also the Valor milk. So all these milk are very good, especially for GDM. So for lunch, these are examples of my kitchen essentials. So I have this keto slim noodles. This is a lot better than eating the normal noodles. So this has 0 carbs, is gluten free, is vegan, it's organic, and it's also sugar free. So this is a very good noodle to use. Then red sweet potato. This is a lot better than the normal white sweet potato or even the Irish potato. Then I have this low GI basmati rice. This is very good and is much better than eating the short grain or the jasmine rice. So for lunch or dinner, mostly lunch, sometimes I can have wheat and vegetable soup. So this is more about portion control. So the quantity of wheat I make is usually very small, but I have it with a lot of vegetable and 2 proteins. I can have 2 fishes or 2 meat or 2 chicken, so that it will be filling. So this is very balanced and it doesn't spike my sugar. Another option is boiled plantain and vegetable again. Again, we're talking about portion control. So you can just have 2 plantain and a lot of vegetable. Have a lot of protein in it also so that it will be filling. So this is well balanced and doesn't spike my sugar. Now, what spikes my sugar might be different from what spikes your sugar. So like I said earlier, when it comes to GDM, you have to do a lot of research and you have to check what works for you. But this worked for me and I hope it can work for you guys too. Other combination that worked for me were rice and coleslaw. So again, we're talking about portion control. So I take a small quantity of rice and I put a lot of coleslaw. Then I use a very big portion of protein, big chicken or 2 chicken or very big fish or 2 fishes. So that will be filling and to also be balanced. Another one is grilled sweet potato. Remember I said sweet potato is a very good option. So in this case, I can boil the potato or I can just grill it and add maybe scrambled eggs or protein again. Then the third option we have in this picture is rice and vegetable sauce. Talking about portion control also, you have rice, then you make vegetable sauce. So this is more like a curry sauce. So you can see some shredded meat. So put a lot of protein, as much as you want. It can be chicken, it can be fish, it can be meat. Then add a lot of vegetable. You can see some sliced carrot, some green pepper, some spring onions. So just spicing it up with a lot of vegetables and eat it with rice. But please make sure that the portion of the rice is very small. So while discussing earlier, we established that one of the myths about GDM is the fact that people think that once you get diagnosed with gestational diabetes, you cannot have any snacks or dessert. So these are just a few examples of things I had. So I had the sugar-free wafers, which was very good. Didn't spike my sugar. So in a day, I would have my almond milk drink at least twice a day. So that was good and it wasn't spiking my sugar. Also, this salt ice cream was very good, not spiking my sugar and it's sugar free. So you can try it also and see if it works for you. Then another thing I was taking was whole almond nuts and granuts. So nuts are very good and I usually have them as bedtime snacks. So I hope this works for you guys also. So when it comes to fruit, I honestly don't think that there's a restriction to the type of fruit you should take if you have GDM. However, portion control is very important. So for most fruits, you can have just one of those fruits. But when it comes to things like berries and grapes, a handful is more than enough. So I used to have a slice of pineapple on some days, and usually what I do with the fruits is I take them in between meal. Say now I've had breakfast and I feel a little bit hungry just before lunch, I can have one fruit in between my breakfast and lunch, right? So that worked for me, and I hope it really works for you guys also. Then there's one very important vegetable I always leave out: cucumber. Cucumber is perfect for people with GDM. It's hydrating, and then it doesn't spike your sugar, and is a very good antioxidant. Because trust me, in pregnancy, you would need as much natural antioxidants as you can get. So guys, I hope this video has been very helpful to you. If you know somebody who this video can be helpful to, don't hesitate to send it to them. Then give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and if you've learned something from it. And if you have any question at all, please put it in the comments because I'll be in there answering all your questions. Bye guys, see you guys another time.